Welcome to the Dom Sub Devotion podcast. Every episode of Dom Sub Devotion is an authentic reflection of our real life in a loving 24/7 DS marriage. If you crave the passion and intensity of a power exchange dynamic inside of a deeply loving and intimate relationship, you've found the right place. You can always find more from us in the show notes and at infinitedevotion.com. Thank you for listening.
Christina McBoyle, welcome to Dom Sub Devotion. It's great to have you here.
It's so good to be here with you, Andrew. Thank you so much for inviting me.
So I'm going to have you introduce yourself to our audience here in a moment for those who don't know you. But from my side, Christina is a personal friend, somebody that Dawn and I have known for several years now. And we've kind of been witness to your journey of life and evolution. And I asked you to come on here this morning to kind of share some of the really recent revelations and changes you've been going through in your life. But for those of our audience who don't know who you are, please tell us who you are.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. So a lot of people know me online as kind of my online persona is Solar Feminine Arts. And essentially I began my work many, many years ago, more so in the realms of the healing arts. So I like to start by saying that because a lot of people maybe consider me a coach, and that's really not something I've ever considered myself to be necessarily. I actually started my work in the hands-on healing realms as an acupuncturist and an herbalist, and dabbled in many, many, many different healing arts over many years. And then slowly over time, I became more of like an online figure, so to speak. And that's just because I started doing my work internationally with women all around the world. And my work kind of over time started evolving from being more about hands-on healing to working with women in a just myriad of different ways, specifically around coming into their feminine embodiment, descending into their wombs, a lot of just very deep, deep feminine oriented work. And initially that started as kind of just really focused on guiding women into their feminine energy, their feminine essence. But what was really interesting about it is as I was doing this work with women, again, at this point all around the world, I just came to this understanding that there was no way to keep guiding women around feminine energy without supporting them and healing their relationship to the masculine. And it was like this huge, glaringly obvious gap in the work that I was doing and in the work I was seeing other women doing in their feminine energy. And so then I kind of shifted my focus and I started serving women in healing their relationship to men and the masculine. And that then required me to go on my own healing journey with relationship to men and the masculine, where I hadn't really done my work yet. And that eventually just led me into teaching about union. Relationship-oriented things and union are kind of a part of what I do, but I would say the main work that I focus on is descending women really deeply into their wombs, their bodies, their hearts, out of their head and their mental faculties, so to speak, and really teaching them to surrender into the nature of who they really are, which in their essence is just pure love.
And then life over the last year and a half or so, couple years or so, has brought you into a whole new experience of what it is to be in union, in relationship. And you know, I love the story of how you ended up meeting your husband.
Yeah.
And that, because that's an important part of kind of where this conversation is going today. Yes. Is how, you know, I don't want to bury the lead here, so to speak, but you know, eventually you've kind of found it necessary to change your approach to all of that quote unquote yes. work. And that started with really meeting Ryan.
Yes, it did. Yeah. So it's an interesting journey for me with relation to what I was teaching, because essentially I was teaching women. I mean, I'm not even sure how many years it was. It was many, many years. I mean, I've definitely been doing work with women internationally for over 12 years now, closer to 13, 14. And when I think I would say the like year or two leading up to meeting Ryan, I definitely went through a journey of really deep shadow work and having to really surrender at the time more deeply than I ever had before, thinking like, okay, I'm like, wow, I'm really being asked to surrender everything that I thought I wanted, which at the time was also union, was like physical union with a man, marriage, all the things I knew that I wanted, family. I felt like at the time, God had led me into this place of being willing to give that up for my work, my purpose in the world, helping women come into union. But I myself was not in union at the time. So it was this very interesting conundrum of like, and I was having incredible results, right? Like women were coming into union with their beloved sometimes right after taking my program. They'd be in one of my programs and I would be guiding them from this very deeply spiritual, intuitive place with these templates that I had for relationship, but that I was not physically fully anchored in my own life. And leading up to meeting Ryan, I literally hit this point where I was like, I might not ever be in physical union in this life in the way that I'm desiring to be, which is in a very deeply like devotionally polarized templating with a man that I can fully surrender and submit to. And if I can't have that in this life, I'm not going to be in a relationship. Like I'm not going to settle for anything less than that. And maybe that means I won't be in a relationship. And so I did go through this very deep surrender process where I kind of gave it all to God. And it was actually, sounds beautiful, but it was really excruciating. It was really painful. It was like brought to my knees to this point of like, okay, I'm going to just like give up my attachment to this thing that I think that I need or that I'm desiring on a very deep level. And at the time, again, it was funny because that felt like my deepest capacity for surrender going through that. I had no idea what I was actually in store for once I actually met my husband, which was right after that, right? Of course, it's like within a week or two.
Of course.
Maybe something like that, like a few weeks of like, oh, I'm being brought to my knees in my deepest possible surrender. And then I meet my husband. And yeah, little did I know I was far from reaching my, most powerful capacity for surrender. I was about to be taken on even more of a wild ride and journey of that. I honestly had no idea. Like looking back now, it's almost laughable. Like, wow, I thought that was my, my deepest ability to surrender to God, to life, ultimately. And I had yet to even fully step into union with Ryan as my husband. But once I did, that was when I really got to be faced with my own teachings on a much deeper level. And that's like a whole deep part of our conversation. But just for a little background for people that don't know our story, Ryan and I met and we got married in 6 weeks after meeting. So we had only known each other 6 weeks and we got married. And within 6 months of that, I was pregnant with our first child. So it has been a very whirlwind journey for us of many, many different layers of deep shadow work, and our humans having to essentially catch up with our souls in the decision that we made. And all of that to say, I would definitely say easily it's been the most humbling journey of my life in the best way.
And then you added a baby to it.
Mm-hmm.
On top of meeting someone and getting married in 6 weeks and then trying to catch up with that, then the two of you made a beautiful son together.
Yes. Yeah. I would definitely say I had no idea how much my teaching, as extensively as I was, which I was very passionately devoted to, just on a very deep soulful level. But I had no idea how much teaching about union was actually blocking my deeper beingness as a woman until I married my husband. And then I would say even more so after that, once I got pregnant and moved through the journey of pregnancy and birth, it was such a huge eye-opener for me. It has continued to be a huge eye-opener for me. That has really made me look back at my own teachings like, wow, I could really use going through my own programs now.
I remember something that I said to you a couple years ago when you and Dawn and I were sitting. You had brought us to show us some river water, like water feature in the Austin area that was pretty, and we were sitting there, and I remember saying something to you that was something along the lines of, I would never let Dawn do what you do.
Yeah.
Because of what it would take from her that would make unavailable for our connection, for our relationship, if she were to be giving of herself in that way. And I remember that impacted you pretty deeply when I said that. Like, I watched that hit you kind of like a ton of bricks.
Yeah. I mean, it's hitting me the same way now. I'm just like covered in chills. I want to share, though, briefly that that was the dream that I mentioned I had last night, was Ryan basically telling me, I'm not going to allow you to work anymore. Basically the same thing you told me then.
So that dream coming up right before this conversation, like, I know you probably more than anyone else I know has a lot of energetic connection to dreams and how they connect to life. So tell me a little bit more about what that speaks to you, and kind of what then you are finding in your own life now as you're realizing some of how the way that you had done things doesn't work in support of what you actually wanted in your life.
Yeah, well, the dream to me, it's funny because I didn't fully remember it until maybe 20 minutes before we got on this call to have this conversation. And when I remembered it, it hit me like a ton of bricks, just like when you said that same statement to me that you said back then by the water. And, you know, it's something that I can feel is almost like one of the deepest, most taboo desires that I hold as a woman, meaning taboo to the part of me that has been so long identified in serving others, and really serving others at times, to be totally honest, at the expense of myself, right? Like just giving and pouring and teaching, sometimes beyond normal human capacities. I mean, I know I mentioned to you the week before I gave birth to Arthur, I taught I had a call that was 8 hours straight with a group of women, literally a week before I gave birth. No, mind you, no stopping. There were no breaks. Maybe a bathroom break, but that's about it.
That's the third time you've told me that, and every time I have the same reaction. Like, I can't even imagine.
Yeah. So all of this to say, like, and I've been doing this work since 2012, right? So it's been about 13 years now. In the beginning, I wasn't doing it to the extent I'm doing it now in terms of holding big spaces or, you know, constantly serving, giving, teaching, holding space for others. But even before I gave birth to my son, I was maxed out as far as how much I was serving. And so going back to the dream and your question, the truth is I had no idea until very recently, and to like many different conversations and processes and initiations I've had to go through with my own husband, I had no idea how much my work was taking from me, and then thus my capacity to show up and pour into my husband and now my son, and really actually embody the teachings, right? Like teaching it almost cancels out my ability to fully be the exact thing that I'm teaching women to be, which is the embodiment of love, and to really rest in their feminine beingness, to move from a space where they're always connected to feeling and to their heart, and to just really being dropped into their eros and their womb. And the truth was, the beginning of my marriage, I was not those things because I couldn't be, because I was pouring most of myself into my work and then wondering why I was getting this feedback of like, you know, difficulty in the polarity of my marriage, and my husband struggling in his own ways to be, you know, fully in his masculine, potency. And the truth was, my inability to step away from my work was sabotaging things in our marriage for quite a while. And that's a really vulnerable thing to admit publicly, because I literally teach women how to not do those things, right? But when I myself got married, I had no idea how identified I was in that version of myself and how attached I was to my identity. And it had to be the marriage and then the pregnancy and birth of my son and becoming a mother that initiated the total deconstruction of my identity, which is what needed to happen for me to actually live what I was teaching women.
It's what I respect so much about both you and Ryan. Well, first of all, your willingness just to come on here and admit that out loud is something, I've been teaching men and women this for not nearly as long as you've been in this world. And frankly, your teachings helped reveal a lot of what I realized that I already knew, but I didn't have language or words for. It was the things that you said, along with a few other really important people who helped me make sense of who I am, what Dawn is, and what it was that I was trying to create and didn't even really understand what it was. I've told this story a lot of times, how we didn't know what the fuck polarity was or what union was. We didn't know any of this stuff. It was more like after I asked her to be my submissive and something deeper started going on and we could feel it beneath the surface, it was more like looking for language to help make sense of what it was we were living.
Yeah.
So, and you were one of the people who was instrumental in that for me and for us and for everything that we do. And so I give you a lot of credit for that, but then also for the willingness to deconstruct that identity when it doesn't suit you anymore. That takes a lot of fucking courage. And so I'm proud of you for that. And I also admire you for that, because it's something that a lot of women that I work with don't want to admit, that you can't lead and follow at the same time.
No, you can't. And yeah, I really appreciate you speaking to all that, Andrew, because what I'm realizing as I'm hearing you talk is there's such a beautiful loop of what happened, because before meeting you and Dawn, I had such a deep, visceral understanding and knowing of this, of the work that I teach, and of these just very natural dynamics between men and women, and what I feel to be the most organic templating of what union is between a man and a woman. I had a deep understanding, like not just mentally, but like on a deep knowing kind of soul-based level. Intuitively, I feel like a part of me has known, and understood this template spiritually for far beyond just this life. And until I met you and Dawn, I didn't really ever experience a couple that was so fully living the teachings, and not in this kind of, obviously you see couples online who are well known, who are whatever, like sacred union, like whatever they're, claiming online. And it's all like
they perform it well.
They perform it really, really well. And that, I had a lot of models of that. But on the other side of that, you and Dawn were like very humbly just living it and not even having necessarily the terms to describe it, let alone teach it at that point yet fully, or at least I know maybe you weren't on a wide scale yet. But it impacted me so deeply to watch you two live it so viscerally. And I was like, this is giving me like a physical example and modeling of my own teachings and of exactly what I desire in marriage and union, and showing me that it's possible. Like between two humans that are very much, I mean, you and Dawn are like the farthest from performative of anyone I've ever met. Like you're just so real, like deep in how you move through the world and relate to each other in your union. And it really impacted me. Like it really did something to me to experience that and to be like, wow, especially when you said that to me, I wouldn't allow Dawn to do that. And it just hit me like, what if this is exactly what's blocking me from what I desire? Is the fact that I'm not necessarily like teaching it, but definitely teaching it on the level that I was, to the point where I was a little bit, I don't want to say lost in the identity, but I lost in the sauce. Like I was very attached, like I said, to, it wasn't for me about the image, but it was about being of service. And it was like pouring outwardly into something that I knew I desired to pour into my husband and eventually a family. And it just kind of clicked in that if I continue going in the direction I'm going, it might be the very reason why I don't have what I desire the most. And yet I'm teaching people and watching my clients come into deep union and feeling this emptiness in my heart, like not empty because obviously I'm being fulfilled through, you know, my purpose and this really deep mission that I have, but empty because a part of me is like, but I want this. And I might not be able to fully experience it if I'm continuing to give my resources to other women so that they can then experience this in their lives.
Yeah, and I'm so excited for you because I know that on the other side of identity death is where authenticity gets to be born. It's actually something I wrote for a teaching on divine union that Dawn and I are about to sit down and record as the very last module in Rapture, was this idea that union begins where ego dies.
Yeah.
Because you can't actually connect to your beloved on any kind of a authentic level if you're relating out of ego. And ego is where all of these things,
Right.
like, well, I have to do this, I have to take care of myself, or I have to make sure that I'm okay without my partner, which
Yeah.
very much blocks you from actually letting your partner in.
Right. Absolutely.
So
Yeah. Similarly, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm excited for, like, I feel the realness of the ego death and the identity death in this for you. And that just makes me excited for you and for Ryan to see what that gets to feel like on the other side of it.
Yeah, I'm excited too. You know, it's really shifting everything. I can say that now with certainty, just experiencing the shifts between us from me making the decision to not work, which was a really difficult decision initially. But now, as I've kind of surrendered more into what you're speaking about, which is just this kind of ongoing identity death process, it frees up so much spaciousness for him, for us, also for me to like really be present in the mothering of my son. And it's interesting because looking back now, I'm like remembering even 2-3 years ago, I was teaching this concept, this kind of theory of she descends and he rises, or basically like in order for the masculine to rise, the feminine has to descend. And at the time, the way I was, you know, coaching or teaching women around this was essentially about her dropping out of her mind into her heart, into her womb, into her body. But what I've now recognized as a much more advanced interpretation of this teaching is like the descent of the feminine is not just about her like descending into her heart, coming into her body and her womb and coming out of her mind. It's quite frankly allowing for the full deconstruction of her identity, because those identity constructs and survival mechanisms that come out of that will absolutely sabotage the spaciousness that her man needs to rise and to lead. If she's not allowing for that deconstruction of her identity, I mean, just witnessing what I've experienced personally, there's all these self-sabotaging mechanisms and armoring systems and things that she's gripping onto because she's so afraid to literally die on the altar of that love with her beloved and like let him lead. She's so afraid to let everything she's known die that she's gripping, she can't soften and she can't surrender. And a part of her is still leading the show, even if it's subconsciously or unintentionally. And I witnessed how that blocked my husband in these subtle ways from having the space he needed to actually lead, even though we both wanted him to. A part of me wasn't allowing it because I was like just very resistant to letting this part of my identity, just be put to rest, because it was just so cozy for me. It was what I was used to for many, many years.
Yeah, and that's why I've talked so much about the necessity of patience. I know you and I have talked about that. I've talked about it at length in my teaching, and people who are in a hurry to like get there hate when I talk about patience. But you can't rush this stuff. You couldn't see this until life had presented you with the people and the circumstances to let you see yourself in this way. And then it still requires you to be willing to see yourself. And my encouragement to anyone listening to this is, when life keeps hitting you in the face, maybe take a deep breath and listen and look at why you keep getting hit in the face, rather than assuming that the problem is the thing hitting you in the face. So maybe you keep walking into shit.
Right.
You've got to allow yourself to receive the lessons that life is trying to teach you.
Yeah.
So I think that the really courageous part of this, and it's why I asked you, like, do you want to come on and share this story? Because I didn't know if you, like, how prepared you felt to be like this out there with this. But I think it's an important message for women to hear. And it's also why when we were setting this up, you asked me, like, well, what should I prepare for? And I said, nothing. Just like, this is where you show up as Christina, not as Solar Feminine Arts, not as like the energetic gift that you are, but just as you. And so what is it, like, how does it feel in your system differently? Like, I would love to give some perspective other than Dawn's, which we've shared with people a lot for a long time, what it feels like in your system to move from impulse, to move from feeling, rather than moving from obligation and force and like doing to get kind of energy.
Yeah. I would say, initially what I think came up for me first, and I feel what will come up for a lot of women in this journey as well, is it almost feels impossible to trust that you can actually do that, and that you actually will be received, and that you have the spaciousness. In other words, like, that it's safe to set down that obligatory part of self. Or for me, the way I related to this part of myself, or do relate to this part of myself, it's like the curated self. And when we have that in place, it can come out in a lot of different ways. For me, it's like I have to be perfect, and I have to show up in this, like you said, doing to get, in a way, is definitely a part of it. But also it feels like some part of us is always doing something for others rather than just being fully ourselves. And when I say being, I mean being. I'm not doing Christina. I'm not Solar Feminine Arts being interviewed. It's like when we let all of that go, what is allowed to come forward is just our essence. And to me, that feels like total freedom. But to step into that, it feels fucking terrifying at first, because a part of you doesn't want to give yourself permission, let alone feel that the world is going to receive you in the same way, especially when you've been really familiar and, like I said, comfortable in the curated aspects for me, like teacher, healer, mentor, like all these things that I am to others. And then in that, eventually, sometimes you kind of lose who you are to yourself. And so when someone is giving you permission, basically, as you did, like, you don't have to prepare anything, just show up as you. It's just like like this huge relief of, it brings tears to my eyes, because that feeling is like, it's like pure freedom.
And that to me is the difference in descent, in the way that a lot of people, I think, hear that, like the feminine descends, or I've used the analogy of the feminine being the roots and the masculine being the tree. So you have like the one going down and one rising up, both equally important, but serving very different roles and purposes. But there can be this egoic attachment to the word descent or to the word roots, like that it almost becomes a hiding, or like, in order to descend, you're basically burying yourself and you cease to exist.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's such an important distinction to draw, that is not what descent is. This is really a coming alive, the freedom that you mentioned, right? This is the point of this, is when you really let go, rather than just performatively letting go, you actually get to experience what it feels like to be alive.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. I think that, and when I really step back from that, the concept of descent, I feel that also this shows up in the concept of submission for women, where they feel like they're giving up something, they're losing something. And I understand that feeling, not necessarily about submission, because I've always felt really good about submitting, but for me, it's the blockage was more around, if I fully descend, like you're saying, Andrew, if I really allow myself to go through that process, it felt like I was going to have to give something up on some level. And it showed up for me through my work, and feeling like I didn't even know who I would be without that. And so a part of me at the beginning of my marriage was like, no, I can hold on to that and fully, surrender to my husband and submit to my husband. But the truth was I couldn't. Like, I absolutely could not. I was showing up as half of myself in the union. And like, I felt the effects of that really intensely. And so I feel that there is this misconception, whether it's descent or submission, that a woman has to give something up to become that, almost, and that there's like an imprisoning or a bondage or like a limitation that happens through that. But the truth is, I really strongly have experienced in myself that it is the deepest freedom we can experience, is to be fully kept by a man, to fully descend, to fully surrender and submit. It frees something in us to literally experience just being a woman, and being in the pure essence of that, not being a this or a that, a teacher, a healer, like who I am to this person and who I am over here. It's like a lot of, I think, influencers don't even recognize how identified they are in their public image, even if they're teaching about union and devotion and surrender and submission. And I was one of them. I didn't know that I was hiding still until I got married and actually was, asked to experience these things physically on the deepest level than I had ever experienced, because it was marriage. It wasn't just a relationship, right? And then all of a sudden it was like, wow, yeah, I mean, we can hide in a descended state. I know, because I did it. But the true essence of what it is completely liberating for us as women.
Yeah, and it's one of the ego's greatest seductions that I see, like women playing out in themselves, where the thing that they're most afraid to give up is actually the thing that is the bondage They think that giving it up is going to put them in bondage, it's going to put them in a state of limitation, or it's going to somehow imprison them by giving up the ways that they control and lead and take charge in their own lives. They think that that is what they can't surrender, and that's actually the thing that's keeping them in the very thing that they're afraid of, right? They're afraid of being stuck. They're afraid of being invisible. They're afraid of being like unseen. But it is the things that they're clinging to that are making that already true, and the freedom exists really in the surrender of that which you're most afraid to let go of. The ego is a sneaky little son of a bitch, and this
very
is
sneaky.
it is the
very sneaky.
It's the most seductive little lie that it plays on women. And trust me, I understand men have their own side of this. That's not what we're here to talk about today. I talk about that a lot for people who are listening to this. Like, whoa, well, men just... No. It's just as fucking complicated for men. It's just very different.
Yeah. Definitely similar, but different, because men just have a different journey than women.
So, what's motherhood like? What does it feel like to be a wife and a mother, and finding yourself now on the other side of, or I know still probably in the middle of, but also coming to the other side of this identity death? Like, what is motherhood like? What's wife life like for you now?
Yeah, it's definitely, to me, the best way I could describe it when I feel into it is it's the consummation of all of my own work, but in a much more like lived form. Like, it's so deeply fulfilling. I feel that I actually get really confused when I hear women talking about how motherhood is so limiting, and they get limited from all the things they want to do. And like, I don't know, I just hear this a lot. I hear women saying like, oh, I'm going to lose these parts of my life, and I'm never going to get to experience XYZ in the same way, or I'm going to lose my freedom. Right. I hear that a lot. And maybe I don't know, maybe I'm just weird, but for me, I feel like motherhood is the point of it. Marriage and motherhood for me is the point of everything else I've done in my life. And so I don't feel that it limits me from anything at all. I feel like it gives me everything. And actually, I'm remembering that I've talked about this publicly, I think once or twice before, where I've shared about how when I was teaching so intensively, I used to tell people, well, part of why I do this is because I have so much devotion and love to give. Like, it's so intense. There's so much of it inside of me, and I have to pour it into something, but I don't have a husband yet, and I don't have a family yet. So this is how I move that energy through myself. And what's funny about that is I think a part of me assumed that once I got married and then became a mother, it was going to be really easy to just take that from over here and like put it over here, right? Like, take all that devotion and love that I was pouring into my work and start pouring it into my husband. It was just going to be this effortless transition. And actually, it wasn't, but only because in order to become the woman that could hold that amount of love in my union, and as a mother, the other versions of myself that was teaching about it and pouring my devotion into a bunch of other people, a bunch of other women, those aspects of me had to die in order to become the woman that can hold marriage and motherhood. And that's still happening, right? Like, I'm still in it. So it's really humbling, and it is very difficult in many ways, but the kind of sacrifice that people talk about, for me, it's very life-giving. It's like what I know how to do, but now it's being directed into the right places. Like, I want to direct that love and that self-sacrifice, which is really just the sacrificing of the ego. I want to direct that and pour that into my husband and my child, not have like all of it being poured into just, different people, and then just a little bit of overflow gets to be then brought into my marriage and into my journey as a mother. That's what had to be like really flipped on its head for me And so it's just the deepest love that I feel a woman can experience is to serve her husband and her family above all else.
Yeah, that was very beautifully put. Thank you for sharing that. And I think, one of the things that I would love for us both to speak to a little bit here is women are going to hear this and they're going to think, oh, so I have to quit working. I have to quit doing everything in order to be able to, like, I basically have to give up everything, and I can't work and I can't do this and I can't do that if I want to have the relationship I want to have. Like that's the binary black and white thinking to this, that this conversation is going to trigger in some people. And so you're my guest here. I'd like to hear you share your thoughts on that first. Like, what do you say to that woman who's maybe thinking, oh crap, I have to quit working if I want to have the relationship I want to have?
Yeah. Well, first I'll say, I believe that I'm kind of extreme in the sense of I'm really, really devoted to the teachings that I've put out into the world. And for me, for my soul, the journey of actually being able to live them meant that I had to go through these identity deaths in a kind of extreme way of letting go of everything. For me to really be able to live what I believe in so strongly, to be in alignment with my own values, there was no other path for me. I had to go through this really intense process. And I don't think it's the same for every woman, because every woman has a different journey on a soul level of what she needs to learn or what might need to be deconstructed in her own identity. And there might be women who are not at all overly identified or, pouring their resources out into their work and service to where they don't have anything left to give to a man. Now, if a woman is in a similar position, or I would just say, if she has a belief system that she has to, work to survive, or she has to work hard, or that she is what she does, then there is going to have to be some kind of identity deconstruction or, descent, a letting go process in order for her to hold the love that she desires. And she might attract it when she's in that, whatever part of her personality or identity or ego aspects are playing that out in her life. But I have seen women lose relationships because of the inability to let go. And that doesn't mean that the letting go is letting go of everything. That's kind of what I had to do. But I don't believe that it's the same journey for every woman. But she's definitely going to have to let go of something. She is going to have to let go of her attachments to certain things. And for some women, that might look like having to stop working for a while. And it might not look the same for all women, but I will say that a lot of times when women would come into my programs or start learning from me, and I would start dropping them into their bodies and their hearts and their wombs, almost inevitably, every single woman who came to me who was very purpose driven, or who was on some level a big influencer or whatever it was, every single one of those women would go through a period where they stopped working, or where they lost a bunch of money, or something in their life made it to where they couldn't work in the same way, or they just suddenly felt like they didn't want to work anymore. And a lot of these women would eventually find a new pathway that was much more authentic to their feminine essence, but they had to go through a deconstruction process first. So one of the things I would say is, you might have to lose something initially, but what you find on the other side of it is so much more true to who you are as a woman, and to your essence and your ability to be in your feminine beingness. And it might just mean that your work looks different than it looked before. It might mean that you do have to stop working for a period of time. It looks different for every woman. I think the truth is that there's no getting out of the descent or the deconstruction process, but it's not going to require every single woman to never work again.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. And, my experience has been the same, by the way. I have not worked with a single woman over a long enough time where we've really gotten to the depths of this stuff who hasn't eventually come to some realization that I don't really want to work, or at least not this hard, or I don't want to have to. Like, and that's the thing that I find with women and their work. If they want to have the kind of relationship that I teach about, that Dawn and I live, that you are coming into and living for yourself, it's not that you can't work. Mm-hmm. It is that you can't be prioritizing work over your commitment to that relationship and that dynamic. Mm-hmm. So, and you can't know the role that it can really play, because desire, right? The feminine imperative is to live from desire. Mm-hmm. And when there's obligation and force attached to the work that you're doing, you don't know what's coming from desire and what's coming from, well, I have to do something, and so I'm going to keep doing this because I know how to make money at it.
Right.
So, like, yes, to your point, you are going to have to give something up, and it's probably going to be the thing that you most fear giving up. Back to what we were talking about before. Maybe that is your work. Maybe it's something else, but I don't think, you said maybe I'm extreme. I don't think this is extreme at all. I just think you're really committed to yourself, even when it's inconvenient.
Yeah.
And it's not about, to me, it's not saying to women, you can't work if you want to have the relationship that you want, if you want to have the sex that you want, if you want to have the dominant submissive relationship you want, but you have to be willing to let go of anything that would stand in the way of you existing in the relationship that you want. So you have to be able to and willing to, and even relentlessly pursue the surrender of anything that doesn't suit your essence.
Yes. Yeah, that's really well said and very accurate to what I've experienced with women for so many years now. I mean, I've seen it so many times. It's kind of crazy to think about. Like, women have to inevitably face whatever it is that is blocking them from being in full feeling of their essence. And that means facing their grief, their rage, their whatever it is, their extreme overwhelm. And if there's anything in their lives, and this is very true for a lot of women, it is work on some level that does this, right? Maybe not for all women, but for a lot of women, when we're just not designed to work like men. We're not designed to be purpose driven. We're designed to be love driven, connection driven, eros driven. And when that doesn't mean we can't have work or have a purpose, but there's been this massive brainwashing of so many women through, very intentional means to make women believe they have to start moving in the direction of men, and that they have to have some higher purpose in their life beyond, love, beyond marriage, motherhood, or creation, or eros-based things, right? And that's not true. But a lot of women are kind of stuck in that trap, even if it's kind of more of a modern version of it, right? So it's still kind of hidden, and they're like, oh no, but I'm serving massive amounts of people, and it's very soulful and intentional, and like I'm that as well. So I know that kind of disguise, like, yes, it's true, and it is so important to serve, and I still have a strong passion and devotion for helping others. But I think what can happen for women, because of our design, is that we start moving in this direction where we don't recognize that, even with, I'll say that maybe whatever the purpose is that we're doing, even if we're doing it with the utmost of intentionality and devotion, if it is in any way blocking us from the deepest well of our own feelings, our own love, our own eros, if it is pulling us away from those resources that we could then live within, it's still a blockage. It's still a part of us that is not going to feel fulfilled, and is kind of being tricked into thinking we're fulfilled because we are fulfilling this higher purpose. But it's kind of like it's an interesting distortion, because in some online modern, spiritual circles, it's kind of like this version of feminism that's very hidden, where it's like such a deep rabbit hole. So I won't get fully into it. But what I will say is, because I've worked with women for so many years, I've watched the really subtle ways that they can trick themselves into believing they're fulfilled, working a lot and serving a ton of people, when there is a part of them deep inside that is fucking empty, and that is running on empty, and that is still deep down just like, oh, when is my man gonna get here? I'm like so ready to be, totally surrendered into a man, but okay, he's not here, so I'm gonna like pour myself into business and purpose and like helping others. And it still can be this disguise for what's actually going on. And that's why a lot of women have to stop working, or step back from work, or cut back their hours, or change the work they're doing. Because if in any way it is, like I said, blocking them, like I'll use my own example. If I, as a woman, am teaching women how to be in deep feeling and be in their eros and like drop into their wombs and heal their relationship to the masculine, but I'm pouring so much of my own resources into that, there's a part of myself I'm not feeling and being with and facing, and because I don't even have time to do it, I'm not like really sitting with myself. Then when that man comes along, I'm going to offer him this like half version of me, because all these other aspects of me are being given over here and over here and over here, and to this person and to this client and to this mission. And then what do I have left to pour into the union? Like, where is my, like I said, I'm going to be a half full version of myself. And yeah, this is it's just more rampant of a problem than I think is really talked about, to be honest.
And all of that pouring outward of yourself really serves to numb the discomfort with your own desire.
Yeah.
Because that desire is the feminine imperative, right? That ache of when, like, this thing I need so badly. If you're uncomfortable with your own desire, you will mask it, you'll hide it, you'll bury it, you'll stuff it, you will, back to my analogy of the feminine being the roots and the masculine being the tree. Well, if you're so uncomfortable with the intensity of your desire to be met, you'll grow up a whole grove of trees that'll keep you from even being able to be seen by that which you crave.
Right. Yeah.
And being able to come into, it's not going to be comfortable, but being able to come into a sense of being comfortable, being uncomfortable in the wanting and the longing and the craving and the needing, and not numbing yourself out from it, but really feeling it all the way it's an essential part of this. And then maybe what the work thing becomes is, you don't know what role work plays in your life until you relieve yourself of the necessity that you've attached to it. And then when you connect back to your own desire, your ability to feel that ache, that wanting, without numbing yourself out from it, you might be able to move in different ways when you can listen to your body and its impulse, when you're actually living in it and not just telling other people how to live in it while actively abandoning that same state in the process.
Right. That's exactly it. It's like, I feel that women can build such a more authentic and just like deep connection to what they're doing when they step back from any aspect of them that is doing it because they feel that they have to, or from a survival-based place, from a fear-based place. And even as I'm saying this, I know that there's going to be women that hear it, because I have women that say this to me all the time. They're like, but that's not realistic. I can't just quit my job, or I can't just this or that, or like, it's not possible. And I just want to say to those women that Like, I empathize with that part. And also, I have worked with so many women at this point who have experienced miraculous and sudden shifts in their life when they stop abandoning their desires and they just admit the truth to themselves.
That's where it starts, right? It's not, oh, I have to quit my job. It's admitting to yourself that you don't really, like, if it's true for you, that you don't really want to do this.
Right. Right. And it's not waiting for their lives to suddenly become convenient enough that they can then listen to these things and take the action. It's listening to the desire and the, like dropping into it and being with it and giving it permission within yourself first allows your outer surroundings to start to shift, to orient to that desire. But it's terrifying for a lot of women to surrender that deeply to what they want.
Yep, because the whole foundation that they built their whole life on was this foundation of, I need to do it for myself. I can take care of myself. I can't trust men. I need to be independent. And as soon as you start admitting some level of your own discomfort with the life that you're living and the way that you've started showing up, that whole foundation is going to start to crumble. And that's that identity death, that ego death that we've been talking about, is when everything that you thought that you were for yourself starts to fall apart. You start to be able to receive something greater.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm living that reality right now. And I just want to say too, for women who are at the stage of fearing what they have to let go to get to where they want to go, that what is on the other side is so beyond worth what we have to experience to get there. But usually the fear of letting go is more intense than what actually happens when we do it. Because as we start letting go, the world starts responding to us differently already. Even if we still are working a job we don't fully, love or whatever it is, like things start to feel and respond differently when we're in right relationship to our desire. And when we start softening and letting down that armoring and the gripping and the like identity clutch that we're in, because there's so much fear, it's like, yes, we will have to go through a process, but we're really held in that process, that we're really supported in so many ways, even by the unseen, as we have the courage to start letting go.
Christina, thank you again for taking the time out of your wifing and mothering and your life to share some of this story with me and with our audience. I want to say this again, I said it already, but I have a lot of respect for you and your willingness to pursue the truth in spite of it being incredibly uncomfortable. And your willingness to share it here means a lot. So thank you. And thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Andrew. It means so much to be here. And honestly, it's just a gift to be able to share the story, because I feel that a lot of women are probably experiencing something similar. And I want to be an example of what's possible, especially because of the work that I teach. It feels really important to show the truth of what that is and be really exposed and real in that. So thank you for giving me the chance to share.
The world needs more people who are living and then speaking about what they're living rather than talking first.
Yes. Amen. So, amen to that.
That's what I see you doing, and I appreciate it a lot. So have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Andrew. You too.